the Bard on the Fort River Trail, going around the boardwalk, we've seen a couple of times. And the peregrine falcon on, we walk up Potwine Lane in South Amherst, and sitting on top of the big utility poles, he was eating something. So we were able to get a good look. And just want to, this is unrelated, but we did see some snow buntings. Was it yesterday, day before at Quabbin? Snow buntings and red-breasted nuthatches at Quabbin.
Another place that sort of near Aquavita Road where you see the peregrine falcon is actually on the other side of the river, on the Northampton side of the river. There's some trees. If you're driving over the bridge, not far from the bridge itself, there's one that seems to live there that I've seen quite often. And I think that one goes back and forth between that huge tree and Aquavita Road. So for whatever that's worth, that's another place to see them.
So is it south of the bridge that you see the peregrine, or?
Yes, so just south of the bridge, right. Yeah.
Plus they nest there under the bridge.
Right.
The peregrines do.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them except for the owl, and the best was the sparrow with no tail. That was my favorite, and I felt so bad until Jim told me it would grow back. So
I did finally get there. I took a picture of a sparrow, and I think it was a song sparrow when I got home. I just saw geese flying overhead. I was there yesterday. It was a nice walk. People were friendly there too. So
yeah, usually you bump into a bunch of birders down there, driving slowly. Yeah. And they'll share what they're seeing and things like that. So. And Rosemary says that she did not make it to Aquavita Road, but had a beautiful flock of cedar waxwings in a tree outside her door this past week.
Yes.
Wow.
Beautiful. They're just so beautiful. They come quite often.
You must have fruit trees.
I don't know what kind of tree it is, but it does have berries. So that's the attraction.
Always nice to see cedar waxwings.
Mm-hmm.
Always want to look for Bohemian.
Right. Anyone else have any reports from Aquavita or any other place they've been birding this past month?
I tried for the golden eagle in Charlemont, but no luck. Had a raven and red tail, no golden eagle.
Yes, when was that seen? Do you remember what day that was?
I don't remember the day. It was a couple of weeks ago now.
Oh, it was a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I saw that report on eBird.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
There was a dark phase of a rough-legged hawk at the honeypot about a week ago. Exactly a week ago.
And you saw that, right, Jim?
Yeah, Patty and I saw it, and I think Joanna saw it too, but wasn't sure exactly what it was.
Okay, good. Well, I think what we'll do now is we'll introduce our next do-it-yourself field trip. And we actually have Mike Locker here, who is going to be our guest speaker. And I asked him to just point out, we have maps and things of the Oxbow, the 1840 Oxbow, and directions for you if you don't know where that is. And also Mike chose 5 target birds for this coming month, and March is longer. So we can get there hopefully more often, but I do have to say, I think the Oxbow has to melt a little before we see some of these target birds, but we'll hopefully have good luck with it. So, so Mike, yeah, just let me know when you want me to share my screen.
All right, Laura, you can go ahead and share it. So while Laura's getting ready, the month's theme is going to be waterfowl. Typically here in the valley, mid-March is prime time for duck migration, goose migration. They wait until the water melts, the ice melts on the ponds, and they will start to come in very, very rapidly after that. The Hampshire Bird Club has typically offered waterfowl trips, usually the second weekend in March. And what we are going to do today is we're going to look at the Oxbow, which is right on the boundary between Easthampton and Northampton. And that can be a very, very productive spot for waterfowl, primarily right in the middle of March. Although if things get warm earlier, then you probably want to move it up to maybe the first weekend, next weekend in March. The way I typically get in is from Route 10. So I go into Northampton, go to Route 10, and then there are a couple of ways that you can get in from Route 10. There's Olive Street. Looks like we've got a second road there. Laura, what is the name of that road? Lovefield? I forgot the name.
Lovefield Road.
Yep, Lovefield Road. So you can get in that way as well. One of the issues is there's a little bridge that is on sort of over the little stream that goes into Arcadia. And this time of year, that bridge is often blocked. And so you can either go in one way or you can go in the other way. And I tend to go in the other way. I tend to go in from the Northampton side as opposed to the Easthampton side. So,
So
the
this is
Oxbow-
Olive Street right here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Folks are wondering. Yeah.
Yep. So I tend to go down Olive Street and then down what's called Old Springfield Road. And as I go down Old Springfield Road, it's a lot of fields and brushy area, somewhat like Aquavita Road. And so it's good to keep your eyes open for sparrows, things like hawks. If there are a lot of puddles on the ground, and there often are, look for things like killdeer or maybe even woodcock out during the day. But then when you get down toward the Oxbow, the thing that I tend to look for is a power line. And there's a power line cut that goes through. And if you follow a little dirt road, that will give you one of your accesses to look at the Oxbow. One thing about waterfowl, it's great if you've got a scope. You don't need a scope at the Oxbow. It's a fairly small area. You can see across with binoculars just fine. But if you happen to have a scope, that will help with some of the more distant birds and picking through a flock of ducks, because occasionally you'll have a flock of something like mallards that will have some more unusual species in it. And it's good to have that scope to help you distinguish those birds. So there we are, the directions to the Oxbow. So I tend to take Route 10, South Street, toward Easthampton, and I turn on Olive Street. And then I just go down and eventually you'll hit a dirt road. That's also an excellent area when we get a little bit later in the spring for things like Connecticut warblers. They aren't seen often, but they are seen down along Old Springfield Road. And what you want to do is first go into the little unmarked, unsigned dirt road right by the power line. And that'll take you right down to the edge of the water. And from there, you'll get a look from the Northampton side across the Oxbow. A second viewing site as you get back out on the main road is to stop at the Water Skiing Club. And at the Water Skiing Club, it's private property. So you don't want to actually walk onto their property unless you get permission from someone there. But usually sort of at their main driveway, which has a chain across it, you can set up a scope or sit there with binoculars and look out across the water, and it gives you a good view of most parts of the Oxbow. I typically then keep moving down the Oxbow, and there are a couple of sites where you can pull over. There are two sites in particular. You can see on this map the little stream that goes into Arcadia, and just before that little stream, there are two places where you can park your car, get out, and again, scan the entire area. This past year, this past summer in particular, they seem to have been inhabited by a number of people. I think Northampton and Easthampton have combined to move those people out of there. But use your best judgment about whether you think it's safe and appropriate for you to get out and scan for birds across that area. And then across the bridge, you may not be able to drive across the bridge this time of year. I don't know exactly when they tend to open it up, but you may not be able to drive across, but you can certainly walk across the bridge. And just over the bridge to the left, you will find another spot where you can get a great view across the entire Oxbow. This is one of those occasions when you might not want to get out there first thing in the morning. So I've forgotten who it was who said, do I really have to get up at the crack of dawn? Ducks really don't seem to care about the crack of dawn. They don't sing, so you're not, unlike warblers, ducks are going to pretty much be out there all day long, be active, be visible all day long. And if you happen to get out there at the wrong hour, the glare from the east of the sun on the water can be almost blinding. So be aware of that when you go out there. I tend to find either really early morning or somewhere around 10 o'clock in the morning tend to be pretty good times. And I try to avoid it around 8 o'clock in the morning when I've had some really, really bad luck trying to figure out what ducks are while I'm looking into a reflection off the surface. So Laura has very, very kindly marked a few of the spots that I like to go to. That first star that's up near the top of the slide, that's what I would call the power line cut. And you drive in there or you park along the side of the road. It can be very muddy this time of year. And you walk down or drive down, and there's a little overlook area that's fairly clear where you can just scan the surface, or you can actually go down to water level and look again. There's a little beach area. It's kind of an informal fishing area. The second star down to the left of that is the water skiing club. And so again, you can't actually go on the water skiing club's property, but you can scan across their property onto the water. Then as you continue on down Old Springfield Road toward the inlet to Arcadia, you've got two overlooks there. There are little parking areas, and you can park at either one of them and take a look. And then finally, on the other side of the bridge, there's a second one. I will also say, if you happen to come from the Easthampton side, then it's going to be a relatively long walk, not super long, but if you're carrying a scope, it'll be a relatively long walk going the other direction. But there's also the little stream that you can see beside Fort Hill Road and Old Springfield Road coming off the Oxbow, and that can be very good for ducks, especially some of the dabblers that I'll be talking about. All right, Laura, next slide. So the first duck I want to talk about is one of our more spectacular species. It's called the wood duck. And first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the two big different kinds of ducks that you could potentially see at the Oxbow. And I'm going to call them dabblers and divers, although there are different ways to categorize them. Dabblers tend to be ducks that stay primarily in shallow water. That would include things like the mallard and the American black duck. You'll often note that you've got a dabbler because you'll see the bird actually sort of flip up and its tail will be waving in the wind as it submerges its head to eat its vegetation and maybe some invertebrates that it can reach. This means that a dabbler has to stay fairly close to shore. A wood duck is one of those dabblers. Wood ducks will tend to stay very, very close to shore. They tend to eat a lot of vegetation. One of the things that's interesting about a wood duck is they are one of very few duck species that we have in North America. And I think it's the only species we have in the eastern or the Northeast that will nest in trees. They prefer to nest in tree cavities, and they are very, very comfortable perching in trees, unlike a mallard, which probably couldn't actually perch in a tree unless it got really, really lucky. But wood duck, as you can see, this is a male wood duck. It's a gorgeous bird. When the light hits it right, these things are just phenomenal to look at. There's a huge mix of colors from sort of a dark brick red to blues on the wings that you can see, to the green of the helmet, and they've got these gorgeous bright red eyes. One thing to particularly notice about the wood duck is look at the tail on this duck and then compare it to what we see a little bit later on. Wood ducks have relatively long tails. So if you see a duck in flight and it has a substantial tail to it, fair chance that what you've got is a wood duck. Next slide, please, Laura. And in spite of the fact that these female wood ducks don't get a lot of press, they are actually a remarkably beautiful bird as well. There's a huge amount of very, very subtle coloration in the female wood ducks that you can't necessarily see from this picture. But again, if the light is right, then they glimmer with all sorts of hidden colors. How do you know you've got a female wood duck? Notice that really, really big prominent eye ring. And then the breast and the flanks, the sides, have this kind of brown and white mottled pattern. We don't have any other female ducks that really look like this. If you check your field guide and you look at the female ducks, you'll see that big white eye ring is really, really distinctive. And then that sort of mottled brown cafe au lait kind of coloration is a pretty distinctive sign that you've got a wood duck. So that was a male wood duck and a female wood duck. You look for these in the shallows. And in my experience at the Oxbow, where I want to be is somewhere around the bridge to see these birds. If I'm at the water skiing club, I'm looking out over the deeper water, I'm probably not going to see a wood duck out there. Instead, I want to move toward the bridge, look across in some of the more vegetated water and see if I can find a wood duck over against the island of the Oxbow. Next slide, please. This is another one of our dabblers. And this is a gorgeous little, and I stress little duck. This is the green-winged teal, and it is one of our smallest ducks. If you see one of these birds next to a mallard, they can look tiny. This is the male green-winged teal, and the males have a really, really distinctive head pattern. So it's got that brick red with a bright green stripe through the eye to the back of the neck. A couple of other things you want to look for on a male green-winged teal. You'll notice that bright white spike right at what I would call the shoulder of the bird. And in the back, there's kind of a cream or beige colored light patch. So even in relatively poor light, and often when you're looking at ducks, you're not getting an ideal view, the sun's not at just the right angle. If you see those two very, very light marks, and in particular, if you notice that you got a very small duck, chances are pretty good you're looking at a green-winged teal. Next slide, please, Laura. This is the female green-winged teal, and here you can actually see why it's called the green-winged teal. Many of the dabblers have a very colorful speculum, and the speculum is made up of some of the flight feathers. So if a bird extends its wing, it's got its primaries way out on the end, and then it's got what are called the secondaries. And the speculum is part of the secondaries. And many cases, as with a mallard, the American black duck, the green-winged teal, those feathers are really, really vibrant when the light hits them correctly. Other things to notice about the green-winged teal female in order to identify it, again, very, very small. It's our smallest duck. Very, very quick. So if you happen to see a bunch of ducks take off and a couple of them really look like they're flapping like crazy and seem like they're going really fast, could be a green-winged teal. Notice also the color of the bill here. On both the male and the female, you've got a very, very dark bill. And something to notice here again, to contrast with our next duck, is look at the face of this duck. It's very brown, doesn't really seem to be much of a pattern to it. In particular, it's kind of hard to distinguish the eye from the rest of the facial pattern. There's nothing like an eye ring to sort of set that eye off, the way there was with the female wood duck. Next bird, please, Laura. This is the male ringneck duck. Here's where we get into a different type of duck. We're no longer dealing with dabblers. Now we're dealing with diving ducks, or they're sometimes called bay ducks. The ringneck duck, interestingly enough, has a bill that still kind of looks like a mallard bill or a wood duck bill or a green-winged teal bill, a fairly broad bill. And that's because the ringneck duck feeds on a lot of the same sorts of stuff. It feeds on plants, it feeds on invertebrates. The difference being it feeds on them much deeper down. So the ringneck duck won't just tip up and show its tail. The ringneck duck will disappear underwater, sometimes for a significant period of time. So this is a classic diving duck. They do tend to be more common on inland ponds than a lot of the diving ducks, things like long-tailed ducks or the scaup, which often you'll find out on the seashore. Ringneck ducks are often inland, and they'll often come to relatively small ponds in really good numbers during the spring migration. A couple of things to notice about a ringneck duck. In spite of the fact it's called a ringneck duck, I don't think I have ever really seen the ring on its neck. The ring on its neck is basically a deep red color. And if the light hits the bird just right, you can see the ring on its neck. What really sticks out about this bird is the ring on its bill. And this is true of both the male and the female of the species. They've got a bright white ring around the end, toward the end of the bill, and then you've got a black tip and nail on the bill. That should be very obvious whether you see them in the spring or the fall. They've always got that. Another thing that you might want to notice, it's not as prominent on the male as it will be on the female, but as you move back along toward the head of the bird, you'll notice that where the bill meets the feathers, you've got kind of a pale gray outline. On the females, this is much, much more prominent. And then it's got what I would call a shoulder spike. So there's that bright white patch that kind of points upward toward the head of this duck. And that's a good way to distinguish it from some of the very, very similar species like greater scaup and lesser scaup. So when you're looking for a ringneck duck, you're looking for a duck that's out in the middle of a pond, in the middle of the Oxbow. It's got a head that kind of looks peaked in the back. You'll notice that it looks like the head is sort of rounded and then goes up, but it's fairly sharply peaked, especially if you look at something like a mallard, which has a big rounded head without that peak. It's got the ring on the bill, and it's got that white spike at the shoulder. But again, beware, because scaup can look very, very similar to a ringneck duck, but black head, black breast, black back, that white spike on the shoulder, and that ring around the bill, and you can be pretty certain you've got a ringneck duck. Next slide, please, Laura. And this is the female. Notice the female has, again, that really, really prominent white ring around the bill and then a black tip. The other things the female has, and actually on this photo, it's not as prominent as it is on many, you can see sort of a pale patch where the bill meets the face. Often that almost looks bright white. And notice the bright white eye ring on this bird. Otherwise, the female is a very, very dull brown. Not a lot of coloration, no matter what kind of light you're in. Males and females tend to hang around together. They're a fairly small duck, so they're smaller than mallards. They're not as small as a green-winged teal, although they're not a lot larger, but you will typically see them out in the water, and then all of a sudden the entire flock will disappear as they all go down. And then they'll start popping up, and they'll swim around a little bit, and then all of them will go down again. And so look for a diving duck, look for that ring around the bill, look for either the white spike on the shoulder of the male or on the female. One thing that distinguishes them from the female scaup is that big white eye ring they have. Next bird, please. And this is another diving duck. Although the mergansers, and someone mentioned a common merganser being out there on the Oxbow right now, I think it was Laura. This is a hooded merganser. Look at the shape of the bill on this bird. This is not an ordinary duck bill. It's a very long, thin bill. It's a little bit jagged along the edge. This bird does not feed on plant matter. This bird feeds primarily on fish and small invertebrates, and it can use that bill to catch the fish. This is the male hooded merganser, and the male hooded merganser, what you see is a white stripe behind the eye. When he raises his crest, that forms an amazing white patch just behind the eye. That's the largest white patch that you'll see on any of the ducks that come through here. The only one that even resembles it a little bit would be a bufflehead. And a bufflehead only has white on the head. It's got a patch that looks something like this hooded merganser right now, a little bit rounder on the bufflehead. But when the male bufflehead opens up fully, when the male hooded merganser opens up fully, it's a much, much larger patch than the bufflehead would have. Notice also the brownish sides and flanks on this bird, and it's got a lot of white on it. It's got white on its breast. It again has one of those white shoulder spikes, and it's got some white in the longer tail feathers that you see. Next bird, please, Laura. That's a beautiful look at the head of the male, and they will be putting on mating displays very, very soon. In fact, I saw a couple at Alexander Dawson Conservation Area just this past week. The male was in full mating display mode, and they, in spite of the fact that they were both in a very, very cold river, they were clearly feeling pretty amorous. So beautiful look at the male. You can see the white stripes from the wings. You can see the big white arc on the head. Next bird there. There's the female. Female is much drabber, but again, she's got all kinds of really pretty barring on her flanks. This bird, you can't necessarily see it super well, but you can see a little of that fine patterning on her side. Both the male and female have these very long, very sharp bills. They've both always got a hint of a crest to them. So I've very, very rarely seen them with those feathers on the head that are flattened down to make the head look rounded. They tend to look like they've got at least a little bit of a crest, and they are going to dive fairly frequently. So look for them around the Oxbow. Again, diving ducks, they tend not to flock like the ringneck ducks. They tend to be relatively solitary, 2, maybe 3 of them together, as opposed to the ringneck ducks, which might be in a group of a dozen or 20. Next bird, please, Laura. This is my final duck of the evening, and this is a bit of a specialty for the Oxbow, although now they're becoming common all up and down the Connecticut River. This bird is neither a diving duck nor a dabbling duck, but it does like to eat seafood. It's the American bald eagle, and it is probably familiar to all of you. When you go to the Oxbow, you should check the big telephone poles that are out in the middle of the Oxbow. Frequently, if you check those poles, you will find 1 or maybe 2 bald eagles sitting there waiting to catch an easy meal that washes up on the shore. These are adult bald eagles right here. Next slide, please, Laura. And this is what the immatures look like. Immature bald eagles often look very, very mottled. You can actually tell how old a bald eagle is based on the feather patterns. They don't achieve that full adult feather pattern for about 5 years. So they go from a very, very dark bird with almost no white on them at all to a bird like this. I would say the one on the right might be a second-year bird, and then they get more and more white, and then finally they begin to get that full adult plumage. Notice the massive beak on the bird at the right. It is huge, and that's a hallmark of all the eagles, whether it's a golden eagle or a bald eagle or an eagle you see anywhere else in the world, a huge hooked beak. And then on the left, you can see that these birds have a massive wingspan. And we say that they have fingers on the ends of their wings because those primary feathers actually separate out. They don't look like vultures when they fly. Turkey vultures also have that kind of fingering on the end of their wings, but turkey vultures have a much tippier flight. Bald eagles just look massive and solid as they glide through the air. No tipping, and they just are a huge, huge bird. More slides? That's it.
That's it. So let me stop sharing here. There we go. Excellent. Thank you so much. That was so helpful, Mike. I've learned a lot actually, especially about ducks. So does anyone have any questions before we're sent on our way to go birding at the Oxbow?
I think
Yes, I do. Can you get to those areas from going in by Arcadia? It looked like you could.
Yes. So you can drive from Easthampton and get to the main parking lot at Arcadia.
Okay.
And instead of turning into the driveway, which would be going left into the Arcadia parking area, the driveway and parking area, you would just continue straight. And that would get you to the bridge, which is where the Mill River meets the Oxbow. And that was the bridge that currently is blocked off. So cars can't drive across it right now. And when they unblock it, the town of Northampton, it's never a particular date. So it's hard to predict.
Okay.
But there is parking along the road and also near that bridge on the Arcadia side. So you could park there and you could look out towards the Oxbow and also up the Mill River for any of these birds. You could then go across the bridge and walk along the edge of the Oxbow as well as along some of those fields.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So
One-
that would be
one-
coming from Route 10 down Lovefield Street, that way to Arcadia.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm more familiar with that side. I was wondering.
One of the problems with that right now is the parking lot right at the bridge on the Easthampton side is being used by about 8 to 12 people who drink beer there every day from about 9 in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon. They don't seem harmless. They don't wear masks. They just stand around and drink beer for 4 or 5 hours.
Is this the, like,
They've been there pretty regularly in the last 6 months,
Okay.
just to let you know they're there.
Is that the Northampton side? Yes?
No, that's the Easthampton side. That's the Arcadia side of the bridge.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Laura, did you run into them today?
I did not, actually. I didn't see anyone at the bridge today.
Yeah, Patty and I saw him, Patty and I saw him yesterday.
Yeah, it could be because it was, it was a little drizzly this morning. It wasn't great weather. Who knows? But it is something to be aware of.
Yeah,
And sometimes what I do is I go down there and I just stay in, I park my car and I'll stay in my car and I'll scan the Oxbow. Also, if you're coming from the Arcadia side, you can park up the hill from there, not at the bridge. There's some pullover spots and I have done that. And then you don't have to walk down towards the bridge, but you can walk along. That's the section that Mike had talked about. There's that little stream that comes off the Oxbow. And it creates a marsh and there are often dabbling ducks down there. Also other birds like kingfishers and along the edge you can see sparrows and warblers when it becomes that season. So that's
Yeah,
a good birding
that
spot.
little river is a great spot for wood ducks.
Yes. And yeah, right.
You said it was a dirt road. Is there any problem with like getting stuck in mud or, parking on the side? Is that an issue?
There's not a problem with parking on the side, but yeah, you definitely have to keep track of how muddy it gets. So with the snow melt, it's hard to predict how the road will be. But if you come in from the Northampton side, which would be the opposite of the Arcadia side, so you come in through Olive Street, you could just come in and park just near Olive Street and then walk the dirt road if you're concerned about getting stuck.
But with the spring, sometimes it gets flooded coming in from Olive Street.
That's right. And that's
Maybe not be able to get across.
right. We might need a kayak, but I feel like that's more April, but it really depends. You're right, Sue. It really depends.
Possibility.
We're hopeful that it will be April so that we can all get out there to the Oxbow and see what's going on.
And there's a lot of fishing, men that fish down there by the bridge too.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions about the Oxbow? Someone asked, it looked like in the chat, someone had mentioned perhaps sending the written directions, which we can certainly do to folks if they want that. I can email that. And if you want that and you didn't get an email in the next few days, just email virtualbirding@hampshirebirdclub.org to remind me. So yeah, that could be helpful to get the written directions. So what the plan is that we will meet again the first Monday of April, and I can't remember what the date of that is. That April 5th? Do you remember, Lesley? Yeah, April 5th at 7 for our Zoom meeting, just to share what we find at the Oxbow. And then we'll come up with an April do-it-yourself field trip. And I just want to remind folks that if you want to come to the Zoom on Monday, April 5th, to register. And so if you could email virtualbirding@hampshirebirdclub.org and let us know to register you for that Monday Zoom, then I'll know to send you that Zoom link. That will be the best way to do it, instead of just assuming from now on you'll get a Zoom link. If we have you on the list for April, then for sure you'll get the Zoom link, and it just helps us keep track. Did you want to add anything else, Lesley, or no? Great.
That was it. Just enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy it. It's a great place to go birding this time of year. So, and again, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Mike. That's great.
Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
you.